Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and this is a bow build using Radahn's Rain and the Lion's Greatbow. This does a lot of damage to large targets, and honestly, it was a lot of fun to do this build in general, and it can be really powerful. If utilized right, with the right setup, it can absolutely shred some of the bigger bosses in the game. It's really exciting to see it have the ability to do this because bows have typically taken a back seat to a lot of other weapons, but with Radahn's Rain and a good amount of buffs and a good setup, you can absolutely shred some of the bigger bosses in the game and pretty much every dragon in Eldenring. Before we move forward though, if you're not subbed, definitely sub to this channel if you love overpowered PvE builds or you love From Software games in general. Elden Ring's been awesome so far. It's been a ton of fun making these builds, and here we go. Let's get into this bow build. It does a lot of damage and can crush dragons and every big target in the game, shredding them for thousands of damage. So first we need to talk about the differences between Radahn's Rain and regular Rain of Arrows. Now with Radahn Spears you get an extra 20% boost, but believe it or not, that only really puts you on par with the Greatbow in general, because the Greatbow does more damage than the Lion's Greatbow. It's just outclassed by it in terms of damage. Even with the same relative scaling, the Greatbow will typically do more. But regular Rain of Arrows is better for smaller targets. For larger targets, Radahn's Rain tends to hit more and do more damage. I tested them both, and you can get the passive effect on Radahn Spears by putting the Lion's Greatbow in the left hand and the regular Greatbow in the right hand. And I tested a whole bunch of different things and found that Radahn's Rain still excelled with seemingly more hits or a higher amount of damage in terms of larger targets. For smaller targets though, Rain of Arrows on the Greatbow may be the way to go. Now, the Lion's Greatbow, much like any bow in Elden Ring, is affected by the arrow's reach and sting talisman, as well as the Ash of War actually benefits from it too. It can be boosted by the Shard of Alexander for the weapon skill, and generically boosted by the Ritual Swords talisman. You can also generically boost it with Howl of Shabriri. Flame Grant Me Strength, those two override each other. Howl would actually do 5% more. Flame Grant Me Strength does 5% less, but it's much easier to do at 15 Faith. And then Golden Vow would generically boost it as well, all boosting the Ash of War, giving it a ton of potential, as you can see here, for larger targets and absolutely shredding them. Honestly, it makes a lot of the dragons in the game very, very easy, even the tougher ones as we're going to see here. And even on the more tougher dragon, by the way, this is Journey 4, I think, on this character. The character I use is going to be level 190, but I'm going to explain how to do this at 150 because it obviously can be done. Generally speaking, though, the scaling on every bow in the game is going to be pretty much a D across the board. So once you get to roughly 50 dex and 50 strength, that'll pretty much cap it. You can go to 80-80 and get some more damage, but you get a lot of that cap, a lot of the reach from 50 and 50 at max, because descaling, let's face it, not great. Bows don't have a ton of potential when it comes to scaling. They scale poor in general, which is unfortunate, but they can be made very, very, very good when it comes to larger targets or certain situations in the game by absolutely shredding them with the Ash of War. Another thing I love about Radahn's Rain and the Lion's Greatbow in general is how accessible it is. The fact that after you beat Radahn, you can get it, and not only can you get the Lion's Greatbow after beating Radahn, you can buy the spears which boost its damage by 20% right at the round table hold, which is incredibly convenient and easy to do. As you can tell here, by the way, this is Journey, I think I said before, 4 or 5 or whatever. This dragon in Farum Azula, he generally has a lot of HP, some pretty good resistances in general, and he still takes a lot of damage from Radahn's Rain, which hits him completely. In larger targets, when you set back and aim this and fire, it's going to pretty much spread out, do thousands of damage at a time, and most of the time, they're not even going to be able to avoid it because they're such large targets. It's actually a little bit overpowered when it comes to big targets in the game, and then when it comes to smaller targets, it's a little bit underpowered. You're going to see here as we talk about that in a second. So this is the tougher Draconic Tree Sentinel in Farum Azula here, and you're going to see what I'm talking about when it comes to Radahn's Rain. It has a very large spread, seems to act a little bit differently than regular Rain of Arrows, and seems to excel at bigger targets. But for smaller targets, as you can see here, it kind of misses a lot, and the center will hit, but a lot of the outside where the arrows rain down are going to miss, and it's not going to end up doing as much damage. although it is pretty cool with a great bow that you can stun a lot of their attacks and even stop them from happening in certain instances by just firing it because it's so powerful. Even so, the Ash of War isn't as great for smaller targets. And as you can tell here, eventually he did go down without too much of an issue, but he does have a slower moveset. Even so, though, a lot of Radahn's Rain seemed to miss him, where with the dragons, it can even do some posture damage, completely annihilate them with the amount of hits that it does, and just stack damage upon damage on larger targets, where on smaller targets, as I'm showing off here, it tends to hit less. It has a wider spread. The middle will hit down, but everything around it is generally going to miss, even though it still does a fairly good amount of damage per the cost of one arrow on the Ash of War. It's not as useful for smaller targets. Now, as I just mentioned before we go over stats and equipment, what's going to be here in a second, and then we're going to show Elden Beast, and it absolutely shreds Elden Beast. You're going to be surprised to see how much damage it does if you haven't used Radahn's Rain on him yourself. It even surprised me, because I don't use bows that often, how good it ended up being. Anyways, as far as regular targets, you can actually stun them with a regular Greatbow shot, and in some instances, stop their attack entirely from happening. I don't think I had that in the last clip, but earlier when I did the Draconic Tree Sentinel, there was an instance where he almost struck me with lightning, and I was able to shoot him and stop his lightning attack entirely. And as you can tell here, some of the attacks when you fire the regular Greatbow will be stopped completely, and that does happen with certain bosses in this instance. It's like a little bit of posture damage without a poise break. Still quite good though, because it makes up for using something as slow as the Greatbow, which obviously doesn't do that much great amount of damage on its own, but that little bit of posture damage is a nice boost. For this, we have the Lion's Greatbow plus 10. Any seal will do. I thought Radahn's set looked cool here. You can get that from the Round Table Hold, Arrow Sting Talisman, Arrow's Reach Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Shard of Alexander, and then you can use the Strength, Dexterity, or Defense tier. I use this on one of my main characters, or I guess one of the ones that I don't use for YouTube as much. I have, I think, 7 characters now at this point. But as you can tell here, you just need 50 strength and 50 dexterity to really maximize your damage on that Ash of War. Everything else is kind of entirely up to you, whether you want to do buffs or not, how much you want to put into mine. It is a little FP costy as far as Radahn's Rain goes, so you definitely should keep that in mind as well. But generally speaking, 50 dexterity and 50 strength. As you can tell here, you can jump and attack a little bit faster. Attacking in between is a little bit slower than the normal way. As far as jumping and attacking, it might be a little bit quicker. However, it still feels slow because it is a great bow at the end of the day. And keep in mind that Radahn's Rain is also very slow in general. Even though it can be very powerful, it is a little bit on the slow side. Now, if you're a fan of my channel in general, you've been watching a lot of my stuff, you know that a lot of the builds that I do solo. I don't really use spirit summons a lot anymore, but for this instance, for a build like this, it felt like it made more sense to use a spirit summon because the Ash of War has a really long wind-up time. Great bows are incredibly slow in general, and I wanted to see how much damage I can do and to see how I can make this build work and make it into something incredibly powerful. And as you can tell here, it absolutely shreds Elden Beast. So Elden Beast wasn't really a problem. Even with the summon there, who ends up dying halfway through anyway, I think I threw Mimic out there, the amount Radahn's Rain does on Elden Beast is incredible. I was fairly certain throughout this that I wasn't actually going to do that much damage to Elden Beast despite his size because he just has good amount of resistances in general, and I never really used much in the way of bows against him. And when I did beat the game with a bow, I used a couple of summons, but I actually used the Serpent Bow and then the Red Branched Bow, whatever the one has Barrage on it, and then the Serpent Bow, unfortunately, despite its arcane scaling, is stuck with Mighty Shot. As far as the Lion's Greatbow, didn't have a lot of experience with it, but it was fun. This was pretty awesome to shred Elden Beast with this. He pretty much got hit with all of it and seems to take a lot of damage from it. I mean, thousands of damage at a time per Ash of War is pretty good against a boss that, generally speaking, is resistant to a lot of things. So it was nice to see that. It was nice to do that amount of damage. And it was pretty cool that on Journey 4 or 5 or wherever we're at here, he's got a lot of HP too, and he's still taking a ton of damage. That was not difficult at all. He went down very easy and very quickly. That was awesome. And that was the first try, even though I did use a summon for Radahn and Elden Beast on that go. It was very easy. Elden Beast was not even a challenge with this bow. So if you're having difficulty with him and you happen to be a quality build, I would go with this bow setup because it's going to absolutely shred them. If you're not sub, definitely sub if you love overpowered PvE builds. There's a ton of awesome builds on my channel. Be sure to check those out. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys there.